So I've been using these LLMs since the days of Gemini 2.1. So I think that was like around 2023. And it's been a couple of years. They've gotten a lot better when it comes to code generation. And I remember like you wouldn't be able to get 200 lines of coherent workable code out of these systems like at all. Like it just was not possible. And now you can actually write anywhere from I would say 4 to 5,000 lines of code within the span of about 6 to 8 hours. That is, fairly decent. So they've made a lot of progress, but unfortunately now that they've gotten a lot of traction, they've already collected the data that they need. Now the price of these models is pretty much going to explode, over the next, I would say probably, a couple months, probably like a year. I wouldn't be surprised if you actually start seeing like anywhere from, $1,000 like a month, models, maybe even higher than that. And so basically, I think that this is a sign that you should probably start looking into like local models. I know, for example, Quinn just had a new model drop like about 2.5 weeks ago, and it's actually really good. And it's only about 35 billion parameters, so it's not a massive, 2 trillion parameter model, something crazy like that. It's actually doable, and I believe that you could actually either with quantization, you could actually get it to the point to where it can run on a single GPU, like on a, maybe even like a 4070 or like a 4080, like the previous generation's cards. And what I want to go over overall in this video is essentially some of the models that I've been looking into, like outside of LLMs, because even though they are pretty useful and you can do a lot with them, I think the way that the industry has kind of handled the rollout of these systems and just training them and just the different versions, I haven't really been like 100% satisfied with how they operate. So, like for example, a lot of times when I'll be using these models, I'll get like a good 6 to 8 hours of usage out of them. And then I'll come back the next day and then I'll ask it to do like a very simple request, like, hey, translate this code into another language or something, simple like that. And it just won't be able to do it. Like something, happened with the model, like maybe it was, manipulated by the company, like maybe it was like lobotomized a little bit to like lower demand. You really just don't have control over the behavior of these models. And it's just very annoying again when you are on a streak, you feel like, you're getting a lot out of it, like even over the course of a couple days, and then all of a sudden you ask to do a very simple task and it's just not able to do that. And so that's like one of the reasons why I'm moving on to local models and specifically models outside of LLMs. So for example, some of the models I'm looking at are gated recurrent units and LSTMs, right? So the reason why I'm looking at those in particular is that there's a technique which allows those particular RNNs to actually have a similar level of parallelization on GPUs similar to transformers, and that's really the main reason why they took off so much. Not the only reason, but one of the biggest was because of the fact that it's able to easily parallelize its operations within GPUs. Now, again, I think this paper came out in like November 2025. So it's been on the market for a couple months already, and it's a paper from Apple. And again, it allows the GRU and an LSTM to actually have that same level of computational efficiency and throughput similar to LLMs. And there's also another model, right? So this is an SSM, a state space model, right? So you would know this by like the Mamba variants, so like Mamba 1, 2, and 3. And there are basically different variants of this state space model that can actually have some pretty interesting behavior that's like more expressive and just like a more dynamic model. And it's kind of hard to explain this just kind of like just talking about it. I would actually have to show you this, and I'm definitely going to do that in future videos. But there are certain variants of like the state space models that they're combining them with like these other like very experimental models of computation that are pretty interesting. So, for example, there's something called an oscillatory state space model, right? Where essentially instead of having a multi-layer perceptron has this multi-layer neural oscillator that's able to do certain tasks and computations that LLMs aren't typically able to do. And there's a couple other models as well that I want to go over in future videos. And the main thing that sort of draws all of them together, at least for me, is the paper that was released. I believe the first version came out in like October of last year. And basically, one of the main things that it actually does is that it reduces the cost of training relatively to the same level as inference. So the thing that he wants people to take away from the paper is that if you can do batch LoRa inference, you can now do training, right? And unfortunately, this doesn't really apply to LLMs. It only specifically applies to the gated recurrent unit in the long short-term memory. However, because those models are pretty adaptable, you can really modify them to a bunch of different tasks. It's not really that much of a downside. And in addition to that, you also have this other paper, which again, it fixes a lot of the issues when it comes to those two model types, with the idea that you can actually parallelize operations similar to how a transformer model operates. Now, the only downside with that paper is that it's only at about a 7 billion parameter count, right? So, at least as far as I'm aware, the technique only allows the GRU and the LSTM to be scaled up to 7 billion parameters and not really any higher than that. Now, it came out a couple months ago, so there might be a new update that actually pushes that even further. But as far as I'm aware, that's like the hard limit for right now. So I'm just laying down the groundwork in this video, just letting you guys know some of the new content I'm going to be pushing out over the next couple of weeks, just because I think that there could be like a lot of progress out of these models and just showing you how it operates, how to actually train these models, and how to get the most out of them.